And we're off. It's another episode of the Suppress Herald. It's Sunday, 23rd of June, 2024, and the propaganda machine at our newspapers here in Maine are in full swing. And I'm sure that the people that bought all the newspapers, the billionaires that through the National Trust for Local News, and the main trust for local news should be called the distrust for local news, are in full swing on getting this propaganda machine up and running for this big election year. So I want to remind you that, yes, these papers are owned by Claude Omidyar and Bill Gates and George Soros and others who are buying them up. They're also trying to buy up radio stations and basically control the narrative. And we know they've got control of most of social media. So control our thinking, control our thoughts, and control what we find. And I call it suppress because it's what they don't tell you that is just as important. So again, we'll go through the week, see what we got, and per usual, counting through, doing our analysis of the what they've got today for the week in the editorial coverage, and it is as it has been consistently the last 2 weeks. You've got 2 weeks ago the liberal versus conservative versus neutral editorializing, the editorial page, the letters to the editor, the editorials. It is skewed extremely left. You had total of 26 liberal editorials, 2 conservative, and 16 neutral 2 weeks ago. And this week, 20 liberal, 5 conservative. It was a big week for conservatives. Five, that's almost a record for the last months, and 17 neutral. So, as per usual, extremely skewed in one direction, and that's what we can expect. So, let's get into a little bit of what has been going on. And I want to remind you that a lot of what we see, there's agendas, and they're key agendas. Immigration is a huge one because it's a huge problem for this election and for our president trying to get reelected. Immigration is a massive problem. And then we've got they're trying to take down the Supreme Court because they don't like the court's decisions. And it is call it a conservative court. And so they're either trying to pack the court or they're trying to discredit Supreme Court justices, take them down. And so that's a big thing. And then, of course, global warming. We had a heat wave here. We had a few hot days, and they're going to seize on that. And I'll go through that. It just is kind of an overwhelming, endless litany of the same old on global warming. We have a few hot days, and so let's just crank it up. But I'd like to start with getting into, a few things. Immigration this week, just a couple of things that came through, and you've got, you know, Border Patrol arrests. Biden passed this new executive order supposedly limiting the, you know, entry at the border. It was mostly for show and mostly because there's an election and mostly because his abject failure of the entire Biden administration to stop this onslaught, this invasion of our country. And what you also have, and what is really striking, is that we have had in the national press a significant number of, just in the last week or two, rapes and murders of innocents by illegal immigrants, some of them that were actually arrested at the border or arrested and then released into the country. We have a 12-year-old girl in Houston was brutally raped and murdered and thrown into a creek by a 21-year-old, 25, 26-year-old illegal immigrants. They've captured them. Then we had a woman who was a mother of five who was brutally raped and murdered. And we have another case in where a young girl was raped and she and her brother held at knife point in New York City. So these major stories, all in a week or two period of time, not one of those stories was in our papers in Maine, not one. But what we do have is Border Patrol arrests are down 25% since Biden announced asylum restrictions. Well, arrests are down. Well, that's because they told them not to arrest anybody. That doesn't mean that the flow across the border is slowed in any way, shape, or form. And reports, if you bother to look at other alternative news, is completely different. So you've got a situation where, here's the immigration fix trying to be in. And then you have a regular weekly editorial writer. Immigrants have almost nothing to do with the housing crisis. Which I just throw that out. Immigrants have almost nothing to do with the housing crisis. Right, billions of dollars being spent in the cities to house food, feed, house, clothe immigrants, illegal immigrants. Here in Maine, hotels taken up with immigrants overflowing, entire hotels housing them, and then now they're being put into other alternatives for housing, for longer term housing. And that has nothing to do with the housing problem. That is just bunk, and everybody knows it, but that's the propaganda that we have with the Suppress Herald going on. So, moving on to the taking down the Supreme Court, you've got the headline: Senate panel Thomas took more trips paid for by GOP megadonor. At least three additional luxury trips given to the Supreme Court justice. They were given to him. He's a good friend of his who happens to be wealthy, has no legal cases before the court, have any that are even peripheral. And the Supreme Court handles that, and the Chief Justice came out, Roberts, and basically said, we look at this and we have our own system, and it's a separation of powers. But you've got people, especially these, basically they're crooks in the Senate, Democratic senators. One is White House, what is it, White House down in Rhode Island, who's just a scumbag, and his wife has been made wealthy through connections she has with their husband senator, but he's leading the charge to try and take down the Supreme Court. And so you get these articles just ad nauseum. You don't never have an article about the alternative, the liberal justices who also have their issues. So that's the you know we got the Supreme Court, we've got immigration going. Of course, you've got the letters to the editor are just extreme on supporting those things. I don't go into individual ones, but you've got the whole thing. I want to go back to something we talked about previously, where you had these cases against Trump. He was convicted with this garbage case in New York City that all legal scholars say is garbage. I saw Chris Cuomo saying that if it weren't Trump, this never would have been prosecuted. Chris Cuomo, if anybody out there doesn't know, he's a Democrat. People get it, but the papers continue to not tell you that this thing is, from a legal scholars and legal perspective, is garbage. They just, he's a convicted felon. So here's a you know follow up. Senator Collins here in Maine came out and said, "Look, this is lawfare. This shouldn't be happening," and has just letters to the editor 10 to 1 that Susan Collins is wrong and that she's bad and that she, covering for Trump. No, she's just saying lawfare is a bad idea. And you've got this whole opinion piece from a local retired attorney and resident of Cape Elizabeth here in Maine. And it's, aren't government prosecutors also part of the judicial system? Senator Collins' statements have not aged well. And he goes through talking about how, hey, this is a prosecution and all of this garbage. The end is the best. It is disappointing that Senator Collins continues to feel it necessary to come to the defense of Trump. The one silver lining in this unfortunate episode is that Sunday's Press Herald report and the recent stream of letters to the editor demonstrate that Mainers know better. This is exactly making the point that the Press Herald is nothing but propaganda. I can guarantee you there are hundreds of letters saying that Susan Collins is correct and that this prosecution of Trump is nothing but lawfare. But he's citing, oh, the Press Herald. Look at all these letters saying that Susan Collins is wrong. Well, that's the ones that are printed. Those are the ones that are published. It's just the same old garbage. We keep going through this ad nauseum. It just never ends. And then, back to the immigration story. And, here's a letter to the editor. Biden's new executive order, a betrayal. And this is saying basically that him ordering that asylum seekers be limited, that's just wrong. You should be letting all people that want to come for asylum, even though what this paper never, ever prints is that 80 to 90+% of asylum seekers, when they get before a judge, do not meet the asylum criteria for claiming asylum. Their asylum request is denied, and ideally they're supposed to be deported back to their country of origin because they were not fleeing persecution. They were just coming here for a better life. And if we have everybody that wants to come here for a better life, open the door and let them in, there's not enough. We will destroy our country. But that's what these people are after, is changing fundamentally the country. And there's one letter to the editor in a 2-week period that defends Susan Collins. That's the one that they let slip through. Once in a while, bullying goes both ways and basically makes the case that these people are just bullying Collins and others that are trying to stand up. And these letters are all just people bullying people into seeing things their way. And then another opinion piece. This is from a Bloomberg opinion. And this is the perfect thing. Biden's immigration order is built to fail. It is built to fail. It's just him doing it. It's going to be overturned. It's going to be, they're not doing anything. It's built to fail. It was known it was going to fail and not have a difference in any difference in the amount of people, the number of people coming into the country. But this is the opinion here. If the president's order stays in effect, people who deserve and need asylum won't get it. Oh, yeah, the 10% that actually do qualify for asylum won't be able to get in. Well, that's probably somewhat of a true factor. The fact that they're just flooding in everybody that just says asylum, asylum, and letting them come in and they don't get, come back in 3, 4 years and we'll let you get before a judge. Meanwhile, they're never coming back. And of course, when they do, they have families, they've had children here. Now they're, anchor babies and all the rest, and we can't deport them. The whole system is built to fail. And they don't give you any of those details. So that's the propaganda agenda. I'm going to get to global warming. It's overwhelming these last 2 weeks because we had a couple of days of hot weather and they went crazy. But we'll get to that. Just a few little pieces on the daily and weekly propaganda that you get. And here's an opinion letter to the editor. Americans should be wary of relying on Social Security. And it's talking about Social Security and being, running out of money and so forth. But here's the part that's the most rich. Many Republicans, including Donald Trump, Senator Rick Scott, Senator Mike Lee, Senator John Thune, Representative Steve Scalise, and many others, have all made the case for slashing benefits, raising the age for earners to participate or simply get rid of Social Security. Donald Trump never does a campaign rally without demanding and stating that we are going to protect Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid for Americans. And the way to protect it is to have a strong economy and have more people working, increase the workforce so that more people are paying in to Social Security and we have more revenue to support it. And the idea that Donald Trump wants to get rid of it, they keep saying this, it's like they want to take away seniors' insurance and all the rest. It's scare tactics, but it's a lie. And all you've got to do is go replay any one of the hundreds of rallies and speeches that Trump has given over the last 10 years, and every time we're going to protect Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. So that's just garbage. Another problem that Biden has is with inflation. The price of oil. He's worried about that. And in the summer, typically gas prices go up and people pay more, and we're still paying 50% or more than when Biden took office. And so you've got an article in the business section here. Shallow demand pushes gas prices down across USA. Shallow demand pushes gas prices down. You have to read all the way through into a next page, and they go into why the recent fall in prices at the pump. Industry analysts point to a blend of lackluster demand and strong supply. Blah, blah, blah. You have to read to the very last paragraph in this article, and there it is at the very end. The Biden administration announced last month that it would be releasing 1 million gasoline barrels, or about 42 million gallons, from the Northeast Reserve with an aim at lowering prices at the pump this summer. And there you have it. He has been squandering the strategic petroleum and now the strategic gas reserves for the purpose of getting reelected. And we end up without that safety net of oil and gas reserves that are critical in a dangerous world. He's putting our country at risk. So there's just typical garbage. Then you get another one. This is all meant to prop up the Biden administration. Maine gets 272 million in federal funds to expand high-speed internet access. Billions of dollars, many billions of dollars were passed and put into a budget 3 years ago to do this. But I read an entire article on an alternative, call it a real news source, that those funds were so completely overrun with requirements and rules and limitations and, DEI basically. So equity and inclusion had to be included in how those funds were used and the environment and everything else. So, people couldn't figure out how to do it. Well, apparently they figured out how to get 272 million, or else they just gave up and let them have it. So it's really just amazing how, you know, they don't tell you that that money was allocated years ago and has taken this long because of all the rules they put on it and all the limitations. So there's the suppress Herald at their best. telling us only part of the story and trying to make the Biden administration look good. Interesting story in the papers this week. We have a local firm, carbon capture firm, shuts down, lays off all staff. The CEO of Portland startup Running Tide, which raised over 50 million for private investors over the years, points to a collapse in voluntary carbon market prices. I've talked about carbon trading and the scam it is. And we have right here in downtown Portland a company that was doing carbon trading and selling carbon offsets to the likes of Microsoft and others on the global market, carbon market. And they lay off all their staff and all. And then if you read into that article, they talk about their technology and how that technology is taking wood chips and putting, you know, infusing those wood chips with material that would absorb. They dump it into the ocean. It absorbs carbon, CO2, I would assume, and then falls to the bottom of the ocean or gets eaten and captures carbon. That was on the paper on Saturday, June 15th. And just a couple days later, here's an article. Scientists criticize practices of shuttered carbon capture company. Apparently, they were doing this in Iceland, and this whole project raised $50 million, had 100 employees, 120 employees. And here's just one section in this. Alexanderson, which is in Iceland, the journalist in Iceland, said an unfortunate result of Running Tide's project is the impact it could have on the wider effort to fight climate change, providing fodder to climate deniers. It's not fodder, it's fact. The fact is, the entire organization, that entire company, was one giant scam that sucked in $50 million, sold carbon credits to the likes of Microsoft. And people were expecting this big carbon trading. It's $1 trillion company, business. And scientists, this article also talks about, and this is amazing that they did, maybe the suppress Herald should spend some time with their, actually hire real journalists to go out and actually investigate the whole carbon market, because this is just the tip of the iceberg. It's all one giant scam. And there you have it. And they and supporting all of this is the whole climate change movement. And I'm just going to go through and wrap up today with a quick review from, this started on Sunday, June 16th, and just was nonstop. I'll just read the headlines of these papers. U.S. braces for extreme weather. Heat waves, from heat waves to possible snow. To possible snow. You can't make this stuff up. So apparently it's not going to be all hot. It's going to be cold too. Then you have the Wednesday, June 19th. Climate Council says latest projections call for urgency. Global temperatures warm, weather patterns shift, and sea level rise. Maine Climate Council study. The Maine Climate Council is all these people, wackadoodles, that want us to do all these crazy things and spend billions of dollars doing things like scam companies putting wood treated with chemicals into the ocean to absorb carbon. And that climate council had, key takeaways. Maine is getting warmer and wetter. Increased weather extremes, okay, even though the data does not support that. We do not have more extreme storms. We do not have more frequent storms. That has been debunked with actual thing called data, where you have the data and it shows you the trends and you put a trend line in a graph, and that's not true. Human health impacts. Climate change poses a health risk to Mainers. I don't know if anybody out there knows it, but 8 times as many people die from cold as die from heat. And there are organizations that completely debunk that. And this whole thing is maybe not a bad thing, global warming. Social and economic impacts. Well, of course, vulnerable populations, sea level rise and coastal storms, marsh loss and erosion. It just goes on and on. So that's the next day. Then we move on. Record-breaking U.S. heat wave scorches Midwest and Northeast. Then you have Thursday, June 20th, shelter from the swelter, people in pools and all the rest. And you go inside, and it's scorching heat bakes much of the United States. Dangerous temperatures are expected to ease off by the weekend. Early season heat can pose greater risk of illness and death. So can cold. 8 times as many people die from cold as heat. And keeps going. Then we move on to Friday, the June 21st. It's hot, staggering hot, just crazy stuff. And let's see here. These small daily actions may affect how well your body manages heat. What parents need to know about keeping kids safe in extreme heat. Then you move on to Saturday, June 22nd. State seeks to dismiss suit that alleges climate failures. Environmentalists sued after officials delayed ruling on a policy that would have boosted electric vehicle sales. Not boosted, mandated. You've got the wackadoodles in the state trying to make us all buy electric cars here in Maine, force us to buy electric cars here in Maine, basically telling the dealerships that a majority, up to over 80% within a number of years, of all their car sales had to be electric vehicles. And that was rejected because probably somebody would have been hanged trying to do that. But it's just kind of crazy. And you have this craziness going on. And then on Sunday, to close it all out, so you had for about a week. This is Sunday, June 23rd, started on the 16th, 17th. The roast is clear. Heat wave shows a sweltering future awaits Maine, scientists say. Scientists say, yeah, scientists. They're not scientists. Scientists use data. They follow the facts and science. But this is the propaganda Herald here. The suppress Herald is at it in a major way, and we're just going to see it on and on. And we wonder why kids are all having problems, mental health issues. It's a combination of basically global warming, catastrophe, all day, every day. There's no future if the whole world's going to burst into flames, which is what they're telling us. And we just have to really slow this down and get some common sense. And but the Suppress Herald isn't going to get us there. They are all in, and they're not going to write an article from any of these scientists, very significant, very knowledgeable, very high reputation scientists who are saying, put the brakes on this whole thing. It's not a catastrophe. Yes, the climate is changing. We can deal with it. It's not on the trajectory that you're saying your models do. Let's look at the reality and deal with it realistically. That'd be great if we could do that, but the Suppress Herald isn't going to let us do that. They're going to print these papers every single day. It's a catastrophe. We're all going to burst into flames and immolate into, people walking down the street are just going to burst into flames any day now. It's kind of nuts. So the Suppress Herald is right at it. They really focused on the election. It's really going to be an interesting week. This week we've got the several court cases. The Supreme Court's going to be coming down on some of these cases, so they're going to have to destroy the Supreme Court. Of course, you've got Biden and Trump in a Thursday's debate, and you know, I anticipate that on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday's paper will be setting minimal expectations for Biden, basically saying if he survives, if he's still breathing at the end of the debate, that he wins. And then, of course, on Friday and Saturday and probably Sunday, it'll be, you know, articles saying that yes, he's still breathing and therefore he won the debate and Trump's, orange man bad. So, should be an interesting week ahead. Hope you enjoyed the podcast and we will see you again soon.